Let my soul fly to the wind, and let my words be carried in the air. And let me be not so obsessed or not so, you know, transfixed by my own image on the screen, lest I should, be held down to a Dante-esque flame that burns me and destroys my egotistic desire. Desire to be, first of all, desire, to be well liked, and desire to be well known, and desire to be appreciated. Let all of that petty, petty garbage be tossed out the window in lieu of something more truthful and something more free and something more light. Wherein does this lightness arise, if not in the ego or in the individuality? Well, the lightness comes from our minds and from our imaginations and from where we choose to go with them. The lightness of our being exists within our being, exists within our capacity to dream, and exists within our capacity to roam the world with our dream. So, speaking of roaming the world, I wanted to talk about something interesting today, something that I've been grappling my mind and thinking about and figuring out, well, I want to write about this. I want to write about this topic. Who here has read Don Quixote? I think that's what it's called. Don Quixote, written by Cervantes, who is a Spanish writer that, interestingly enough, died almost at the same time as Shakespeare, on the exact same date, but it might have been a couple of years before or after Shakespeare's death. Also, interestingly enough, about the novel Don Quixote, it has been translated more times than any novel in history, second behind only the Bible. So, of course, the Word of God has been translated into innumerable languages, as well as the word of Señor Cervantes. What is this book about? Why has this book... My question after I've read this book is, okay, what's the big deal? Like, what's the hubbub about, and why is this book so popular, and why has it been translated in all of these different languages? I mean, it's quite a lighthearted book. It's quite funny, and it's quite interesting, and the story follows this man whose original name is, I think, Aldonso, Quixote, something like that, but he changes his own name in lieu of becoming somebody else. So he becomes a knight errant, a knight who is unbound to any kingdom, unbound to any ruler, unbound to any prince or nobleman. He is a free roaming knight who goes and seeks adventures. And of course, can't be talking about this knight without bringing right into the picture his lovely, short, humorous, traditional squire, who is like a servant to the knight. And both of these men, Don Quixote and Sancho Panza, the name of the squire, they roam around the entire multitudinous Spain, and they try to find adventures. And they find adventures. I mean, or at least what we could say, like, they find adventures and they have adventures find them. But more appropriately, I think a better word than adventure would probably be misadventure, because unfortunately, Don Quixote's quest to be a knight has a lot of unlucky, let's say even beginnings. It's birthed within a mind plagued by reading books on chivalry, and these books were considered to be the devil's plaything. by Cervantes, actually, specifically, and he himself quotes in his prologue and at the end of the story that the reason he wanted to write the story is because he wanted to argue against the purpose of chivalric romances. He was just completely against, you could say, contrary to the idea of a chivalric romance. The reality of it, the truth behind it, the history behind it, if such a history does in fact exist, that he wanted just to write a parody about a knight who just falls into all of these blunders along his path to apparent greatness. Now, the irony is actually that this has become one of the most well-known books on knight errantry, knights that go and roam the world, that probably has ever existed. So, I mean, talk about irony. And actually, this book has a lot of moments and a lot of layers to it in regards to satire and making fun of, critiquing people, ultimately people. I mean, the book is centered around the relationship of the servant and the master. But what we come to see quite soon is that this relationship is very unanimous and interdependent. Both men sort of depend on one another for many different things. But what we come to see throughout the progression of the novel is growth, ultimately. They depend on each other for growing and for creating a lasting friendship with one another, a friendship that goes beyond just wanting someone because of what they can do for you, kind of like a means to an end sort of friendship. They truly care about one another, and loyalty is something that binds them. So going back to describing Don Quixote a little bit, so he is a man that has become knighted himself as a true and loyal knight to the kingdom of Spain. Now that doesn't mean that he serves the king, but that means that he is a nobility. He has actually also called himself the Don, because that was a title that was given to people of a certain noble class. And he wasn't a Don before he became a knight, and he became a Don because he knighted himself as the Don, which I guess first and foremost introduces us to his kind of state of mind and one of the major themes of this book, which is the theme of, madness, specifically in the character of Don Quixote, madness versus like foolishness versus reality, we could even say, but versus kind of like how other people consider the situation. Pretty much everyone considers him to be mad, crazy, like not angry mad, but mad as in like psycho, because he sees things. His mind is very much troubled by these enchanters, these kind of like magical forces or magical beings that in his mind are the ones that are causing him to see the situation not like everybody else sees it. And I mean, yeah, that is in a sense, we could call that actual madness. But it's strange because he's very much aware of his own madness. He's not mad like someone who is just in the midst of their own madness. He's very a self-aware character. Very self-aware. That's, I think, one of his charms. And I think that Cervantes was also very self-aware as he was writing this story, thinking about all of the hypocrisies that are inherent within the story's structure and the story's frame, we can say. One of the biggest hypocrisies of the story, it's supposed to be a book derailing or objecting, that's the word, objecting knight errantry, but ironically becomes the most well-known novel about knight errantry, even though it's a satire. How is that possible? Crazy. Another irony, really interesting. Cervantes himself, well, first of all, he's not an actual character in the book, but his voice is just so loud and clear, like throughout the entire telling of the story, that it's almost as if he were a character that was taking this journey along with Don Quixote and his squire. He's very there. He's very present. And his major concern, or the kind of weight that he carries on his shoulder, or his shtick, you could say, or what really grinds his gears, to go back to Peter and Family Guy, what really grinds Cervantes' gears is when people proclaim that, things that didn't actually happened. Or when people take art and writing, stories and drama, too lightly, and they just make things up. How can you just make something up? Don't you have a certain duty as a writer to only write what is truthful and what is honest, and not just write for the sake of pure whimsy or pure just entertainment even. So he has a shtick against other writers who write primarily, for no historical accuracy or no truth within their narrative, and just make things up and state them as being real, which is actually one of his qualms with the novels of knight errantry, because Don Quixote believes that these novels happened and their history is real, and that the knights and the characters in them were real as well. However, Cervantes makes it very loud and clear that that's not the case, and that's one of the biggest reasons that others consider Don Quixote to be foolish and completely crazy and bonkers, because how could one believe such a thing? That these knights actually traveled the world, conquering, giants and battling dwarfs and saving damsels in distress, and all of it. All just watch Shrek. Saving dragons from castles, or saving maidens from dragons, and all of that fun stuff. So Cervantes has a bone to pick with writers who proclaim things to be something, whereas the things aren't as they appear to be. So saying something is honest and then not having it be honest. But herein lies another irony. The novel, Don Quixote, is itself presented as a truthful account of a man named Don Quixote who lived in Spain from this date and this date in this town and died at this date, and his death is actually in the book. And the second part of the book references the first part of the book, so makes it seem as if this was all very real. Very strange. And then at the same time, Cervantes is railing against people who write fake books, even though Don Quixote is a book that's completely made up. That is what boggles my mind, and that's what I'm very tempted to just call him a hypocrite. But at the same time, I'm wondering if there's like a deeper meaning to it all, and I'm just not able to like wrap my mind around what that potentially could be. So I'm, I want you guys to sit with that. I want this video to just kind of like go out there into the ether, and have you all sit with it and potentially, be interested in picking up the book. The book is quite the book. It's 943 pages. Look at that thickness. That's juicy. I mean, I read it like so quick though. It's the longest book I've ever read in my life, and yet I read it in like I think 3 weeks only. there were certain days that I was reading like 100 pages a day. It's such an easy read, and it's beautifully written too. I mean, talk about Cervantes is prose. Oh my God, it's I couldn't stop. I mean, every person that I started talking to or texting, I would start texting in the Cervantes like way because it's just you begin to embody this entire setting and this entire sort of story and narrative that you're in. It's an all-encompassing book where me uh just I don't exist. I'm not a thing as I'm reading this book. I'm very much just like following these two men along their adventures, and it's just like hilarious. I actually laughed out loud a couple of times because I mean it was written 500 years ago, up just about, and it still makes me laugh out loud. Talk about the universality of humor, or just talk about Cervantes's prose because that's, I mean, just and they're just amazing writer, just delicious writer. Yeah, so yeah, okay, this is a book review. That's what this is. I knew I was getting somewhere. I got to the end, right? You're supposed to get, no, I got to the beginning at the end. And that's what you're supposed to do. That's what they always tell you about writing good essays. You know, you start off with a question, and only by the time you write the whole essay do you actually figure out what your answer is to the question. That's my life in a nutshell. I don't know where I'm at right now. I mean, I've only been around for this many years. By the end of it, it all makes sense to me, I hope. Or else they've been lying to me this whole time. All right, so Don Quixote by Miguel De Cervantes. I think that this is the first book review that I have come across with this book, and I'm very, very happy to be doing the first one. That's me inside the helmet. Uh, yeah, so I'm Don Quixote after. All right, bye.